Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling this really fascinating idea of cognitive surplus
Oh, yeah.
and how it's changing the way we connect and contribute in the age of social media. It might surprise you how relevant this is to your own life.
Yeah, it's one of those concepts that really makes you look at the world differently once you kind of wrap your head around it.
Absolutely. To help us unpack all of this, we've got Clay Shirky's book, Cognitive Surplus,
Right.
which is just full of really insightful observations about how technology is reshaping our social landscape.
Yeah.
But we're not just going to summarize the book or anything. We're also diving into some research and real-world examples to see how these ideas play out in practice.
Awesome.
You ready to get those brain cells
Yes,
firing?
let's do it.
All right, so let's start with the basics. What exactly do we mean by cognitive surplus? It sounds kind of technical.
Yeah, it kind of does, but it's actually a pretty simple idea once you break it down.
Yeah.
It's basically the combination of our free time, the hours we're not working or sleeping, and the amazing new tools that allow us to connect and collaborate with others on a global scale. Think
Right.
social media, video sharing, online forums, all that good stuff.
Well, it's like all that potential energy just waiting to be tapped.
Right, exactly. And Shirky argues that for a long time, this potential was kind of wasted. You know? He points out that things like bowling leagues and neighborhood associations were already declining before the internet even came along. People had free time, but they didn't have many meaningful ways to use it.
Right.
Then digital tools came along, and boom, everything changed.
Yeah. It's almost like we went from a world of limited connection to a world of almost limitless possibilities.
Yeah.
Suddenly, we can connect with people who share our interests, learn new skills, create and share our own content, and even contribute to these massive collaborative projects, all from our laptops or phones. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. And it raises a whole bunch of questions about how we use this newfound power, both individually and as a society.
Okay, so we've got all this free time and these incredible tools. But what actually motivates us to use them? Why do people spend hours on end scrolling through social media or contributing to Wikipedia or organizing online campaigns?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Shirky argues that we need to look beyond those traditional economic incentives. The idea that people are primarily motivated by money.
Right.
He dives into these things called intrinsic motivations. These are the things that drive us from within, like the desire for autonomy, competence, belonging, and generosity.
So it's not just about getting paid. It's about feeling good about what we're doing
Yeah.
and connecting with others in a meaningful way.
Exactly. And different activities tap into these motivations in different ways.
Yeah.
For example, the motivations for someone contributing to open source software might be quite different from the motivations of someone posting funny cat videos on YouTube.
Right. Right. That makes sense. I mean, we all have different things that get us excited and make us want to participate.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is that this whole idea of motivation gets even more complex when you start looking at things from a behavioral economics perspective.
Yeah.
The source material mentions this classic experiment called the ultimatum game. Have you ever heard of it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great example of how our behavior doesn't always follow the predictions of traditional economic theory.
I think our listeners would love to hear about it. Could you walk us through it?
Sure. So in the ultimatum game, you have two people. Let's call them player A and player B.
Oh.
Player A is given a sum of money, say $100,
Okay.
and they have to propose a split with player B.
Nice.
So they could offer to split it 50-50. Or they could offer player B only $10 and keep $90 for themselves.
Gotcha.
Player B can then either accept the offer, in which case both players get their share, or they can reject it, in which case neither player gets anything.
Okay, so logically, you'd think player B would always take the money, right?
Right.
Even a small amount is better than nothing.
You would think so, but that's not what happens in reality.
Really?
People consistently reject offers they perceive as unfair, even if it means losing out financially. It's almost as if we're wired to care about fairness even more than we care about making a quick buck.
It's like we're saying, I'd rather get nothing than let you get away with being greedy.
Exactly. It highlights this really important point. Our social motivations are deeply intertwined with our economic decisions.
Interesting.
And this has huge implications for how we design and govern online platforms, which is something we'll definitely delve into later.
This is why I love these deep dives.
Uh-huh.
You start with this seemingly simple concept like cognitive surplus, and suddenly you're tumbling down this rabbit hole of human behavior and social dynamics.
That's a deep rabbit hole.
It's amazing.
Wow.
And it reminds me of another fascinating study mentioned in the source material, the one about the daycare center that started fining parents for picking up their kids late.
Oh, yes. The fine is a price study. That's a classic example of how our best intentions can sometimes backfire when we try to apply market logic to social situations.
Can you remind us what happened in that study?
Of course. So, this daycare center was having a problem with parents being late to pick up their kids,
Okay.
which was obviously disruptive for both the staff and the children.
Right.
They decided to implement a fine for late pickups, thinking it would incentivize parents to be more punctual.
Seems logical.
Right, think so. But the surprising result was that lateness actually increased after the fine was introduced.
Wait, that doesn't make sense. Shouldn't the fine have discouraged parents from being late?
You'd think so, but here's what the researchers found. By introducing a fine, the daycare center had inadvertently shifted the relationship between parents and teachers from a social one to a purely transactional one. So instead of feeling a social obligation to be on time,
Right.
parents now felt like they were simply paying for a service. They were essentially buying the right to be late.
Wow. That's such a powerful illustration of how our assumptions about human behavior can sometimes lead to unintended consequences, especially in social contexts. And it makes me think about the different ways we share things online.
You're right. Shirky talks about the spectrum of sharing from personal to communal to public and ultimately civic sharing.
And as we move along that spectrum, the impact expands beyond just individual.
Exactly. It's like
Right.
ripples spreading out from a stone dropped in a pond.
Okay.
So with personal sharing, like posting those cat videos, the impact might be limited to just our friends and family.
Right.
But then you've got communal sharing, like those online support groups for postpartum depression mentioned in the material.
Right.
Suddenly you're connecting with people you might never have met in real life, and you're providing support and validation that can be incredibly valuable.
Right.
And then you have public sharing, like the Apache open source software project,
Oh.
which benefits millions of people around the world. Or think about Wikipedia, a massive collaborative effort to create a free encyclopedia that anyone can access. It's incredible.
And then at the far end of the spectrum, you've got civic sharing, which is all about using these tools to create social change and address broader societal issues.
Right.
The Pink Chatty campaign in India is a perfect example of this. You might remember that story.
Yeah.
A group of women used Facebook to mobilize against a fundamentalist group that had attacked women for drinking in a pub.
It's an incredible story.
It is. They decided to send pink underwear chatty in Hindi to the leader of the group as a symbol of feminine defiance.
Wow.
It was a brilliant way to use a simple, everyday object to make a powerful statement and challenge these patriarchal norms.
Absolutely.
And the campaign took off like wildfire, attracting international attention and sparking a much-needed conversation about women's rights in India.
It really shows how social media can be this incredibly powerful tool for amplifying voices and mobilizing people around a common cause.
It does. But this also leads us to a crucial question.
Yeah.
If all this potential is out there, how do we prevent these new platforms from descending into chaos? How do we ensure that our cognitive surplus is used for good and not for, let's say, creating even more cat videos?
That's $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something Shirky tackles head on. He argues that governance is absolutely essential for the long-term health and sustainability of these platforms.
Okay.
But it's not about top-down control. He points to the example of the U.S. Constitution.
Which reminds us that good governance systems often evolve organically, right?
Exactly. Think about it. The first U.S. Constitution wasn't very effective. It wasn't until they created a new one adapting to their needs that they formed a truly unified nation.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot between freedom and order, between giving people the space to innovate and creating enough structure to prevent things from falling apart.
That makes me think about Amtrak's quiet car.
Oh, yeah.
It works because there's this shared understanding of the rules.
Right.
And people are generally willing to enforce them themselves. You don't need a conductor constantly shushing people.
Right.
Because the passengers will often do it themselves.
That's a great example. It highlights how clear rules, combined with a willingness to enforce them, can empower people to self-regulate.
Yeah. And that brings us to another key point. No one gets it right on the first try.
Very true.
Yeah, think about Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine what those early versions must have looked like?
I can't even imagine.
Or Twitter, for that matter. They've both gone through so many changes over the years, constantly adapting based on user feedback and the changing landscape of the internet.
Exactly. And this is where that whole idea of experimentation becomes so important.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to try things out to see what works and what doesn't, and to adjust your approach as you go. It's an iterative process.
And it makes me think about companies like Flickr and Meetup, which have been incredibly successful at integrating user feedback into their design process
Yeah.
by paying close attention to how people are actually using their platforms.
They've
I
been
know.
able to create products that are truly user-centered.
It's fascinating how this is changing the dynamic between producers and consumers. It's not so clear-cut anymore.
Hmm.
In many ways, users are becoming co-creators. It's a pretty exciting shift, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it brings us back to Shirky's big question. How will we use this newfound power? What will we do with all this cognitive surplus at our disposal?
He poses this rather stark choice, doesn't he? Will we build an invisible university, a global network of shared knowledge and collaborative action? Or will we settle for an invisible high school,
Okay.
a place of fleeting entertainment and wasted potential?
That's a pretty powerful image. And it's a question we all need to grapple with, right?
Yeah.
What role do we want to play in shaping this future? It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, but it's important to step back and think about the bigger picture, isn't it?
Absolutely. The choices we make, both individually and collectively, will determine what this new world looks like. We're at a pivotal moment, and I think it's important to be aware of the stakes. Well said. This has been an incredible conversation so far, but we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack, and I can't wait to dive into some more specific examples in our next segment.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it.
We'll be right back after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
See you soon.
All right, welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing governance in online spaces and how important it is to adapt and experiment in this constantly changing digital world.
Yeah. And it's amazing how often those big changes, the ones that really shape the landscape of the internet come from totally unexpected places.
It's true. Like,
Yeah.
who could have predicted that a platform like Flickr, originally designed for sharing snapshots, would become a hub for citizen journalism and even political activism?
It's a perfect example of how you can't really predict the future of social media. Think about YouTube, too. It
Okay.
started as a place to share videos of, well, pretty much anything. And now it's this massive platform for education, entertainment, and even social commentary.
It's like Shirky says, the future doesn't unfold on some preordained track. Things change because people figure out what's possible right now, and then they push to make it happen.
Exactly.
They see an opportunity and they run with it.
Yeah, and a lot of times that push comes from everyday people, not big corporations or institutions. Take the responsible citizens in Lahore, Pakistan, for example. They were just 3 young guys frustrated with the garbage problem in their city
Oh,
who decided to take action.
okay.
They used Facebook to rally their friends to help them clean up the streets.
Wow.
It's such a simple idea, but it had a huge ripple effect.
It's a fantastic illustration of what Shirky calls positive deviance.
Yeah.
People who go above and beyond the norm, even when faced with, similar challenges.
Right.
They don't just complain about the problem, they do something about
They
it.
take action.
And what's really inspiring is that they weren't just cleaning up trash, they were shifting the entire culture of civic engagement in their community.
Right.
They showed people that it's possible to make a difference, even in small ways.
And that's where the power of social contagion comes in. Research has shown that our behaviors are influenced not just by our close friends, but also by the friends of our friends,
Okay.
and even their friends, up to 3 degrees of separation.
That's amazing.
It's pretty incredible.
It's like those viral videos we all see popping up in our feeds.
Yeah.
One person shares it, then their friends share it, and so on, until millions of people have seen it. Except in this case, it's positive action that's spreading instead of just a funny cat video.
Precisely. The responsible citizens weren't just cleaning up streets. They were demonstrating positive civic engagement to their entire social network.
Right.
And that had the potential to inspire change far beyond their immediate circle.
This brings us back to a key point we touched on earlier. The real value of social media lies not just in the technology itself, but in how we use it to connect, share, and create with others. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for, less good purposes.
Absolutely. And one of the most striking examples of how we can harness this collective power for good is the rise of open source software.
Right?
The story of the Apache web server is a testament to what can be achieved through collaborative, volunteer-driven efforts.
It's mind-blowing to think that a piece of software that powers a significant chunk of the internet
I know.
was created not by some big corporation, but by a global community of programmers working together, often in their spare time, because they believed in the project.
It really challenges the old assumptions about what amateurs are capable of. For a long time, there was this belief that serious, valuable work could only be done by professionals, by people getting paid. But the open source movement has completely turned that idea on its head.
And what's so fascinating about this is that it demonstrates how people are motivated by more than just money. They're driven by a desire to contribute, to be part of something larger than themselves, to create something of value that benefits everyone.
It ties back to those intrinsic motivations we were talking about earlier: autonomy, competence, belonging, and generosity. These are powerful forces, and they're often overlooked in traditional economic models.
So if we want to harness this collective potential, how do we create online spaces that encourage participation, collaboration, and the creation of real value? What are the ingredients for a successful online community?
That's a great question, and there's no single recipe for success, of course. Every community is different, and what works in one context might not work in another. But there are some key insights we can glean from the source material that might help us understand the dynamics of online groups.
Shirky talks about the importance of starting small, right? It's tempting to try to create something huge and ambitious right out of the gate, but that often leads to failure.
It's like trying to build a skyscraper without a solid foundation. Successful communities usually start with a small, dedicated group of people who share a common vision and are willing to put in the effort to get things off the ground. The Apache web server, for example, started with just a handful of programmers working together.
And as their project gained momentum and more people got involved, they were able to develop a robust governance structure and a culture of collaboration that allowed them to scale their efforts effectively.
Exactly. It's a process of organic growth, of building trust and a shared understanding over time. And this is where the concept of culture becomes really important.
Mhm.
Shirky emphasizes that a community's culture, its shared values, norms, and ways of interacting, can make or break its success. It's like the invisible glue that holds everything together.
So it's about creating a space where people feel welcome, respected, and empowered to contribute.
Exactly. Think about it. If you join an online forum and everyone is rude, dismissive, or constantly arguing, you're not likely to stick around.
Mm.
But if you find a space where people are welcoming, respectful, and genuinely interested in what you have to say, you're much more likely to feel a sense of belonging and to contribute.
It makes sense. Nobody wants to spend their time in a toxic environment. It reminds me of what Shirky says about defaulting to social when designing online platforms.
Oh, yeah.
It's about creating spaces where collaboration and sharing are encouraged and rewarded rather than making them an afterthought.
The example of Delicious, the bookmarking service, is a great illustration of this principle. Unlike its predecessor, Backflip, which made sharing optional,
Right.
Delicious made sharing public by default. And this simple change had a huge impact on the growth and success of the platform.
It's like baking generosity and collaboration into the very fabric of the site.
Right.
You're encouraging those behaviors from the very beginning.
Precisely. And that's a crucial lesson for anyone who wants to build a thriving online community. It's not enough to just provide the tools. You have to create an environment that encourages people to use those tools in ways that benefit both themselves and the group as a whole.
And that often means thinking carefully about the incentives you create, the rules you establish, and the behaviors you choose to reward. You need to make sure you're encouraging the kind of interactions you want to see.
Right. And as online communities grow, one of the challenges they often face is managing the power dynamics that naturally emerge. In a small group, everyone can participate more or less equally,
Right.
but as the group expands, it becomes more difficult to maintain that balance.
Shirky talks about this in his discussion of core and peripheral members.
Yes.
As a community grows, a smaller core group often emerges who are more active, more influential, and have a greater stake in the success of the group.
Right.
And this can sometimes create tension with peripheral members who may feel marginalized or excluded.
It's a dynamic that every successful online community has to grapple with. And there's no easy answer. It's about finding ways to ensure that all voices are heard, that all members feel valued, and that the benefits of participation are shared as equitably as possible.
So how do you do that? How do you make sure everyone feels like they have a seat at the table, even as the table gets bigger and bigger?
Well, Shirky suggests that one way to address this challenge is to offer different levels of involvement to different users.
Right.
Some people might want to be deeply involved in the day-to-day operations of the community,
Right.
while others might be content to contribute in smaller ways, like fixing typos on Wikipedia or submitting a funny photo to a meme site.
It's about recognizing that people have different levels of time, energy, and commitment they're willing to invest.
Exactly.
And a successful community will find ways to accommodate those different levels of participation, making it easy for everyone to contribute in ways that are meaningful to them.
Exactly. And it also highlights how important diversity is for the health and vitality of any online community. The more diverse the range of perspectives, experiences, and skills, the more robust and resilient the community will be.
It's like building a digital ecosystem where different species can thrive and contribute to the overall health of the system.
That's a great analogy. And this idea of diversity also applies to the types of activities and contributions that are valued within a community.
Okay.
Some communities might focus on creating specific products like open source software or Wikipedia articles.
Right.
Others might be more focused on providing social support like the meetup.com groups for postpartum depression.
So it's about recognizing that there are many different ways to create value and that a successful community will embrace that diversity
Yeah.
rather than trying to fit everything into a single mold.
Right. And it's important to remember that online communities don't exist in a vacuum. They're embedded within a larger social context, and they're influenced by the norms and values of the society in which they operate.
Shirky makes this point when he talks about the Pink Chatty campaign,
Hmm?
which was not only a response to a specific incident of violence against women, but also a reflection of the broader cultural dynamics in India.
Right.
It couldn't have happened in a different time or place.
It's a powerful example of how online activism can both shape and be shaped by the social context in which it unfolds. And it underscores the importance of understanding those broader cultural forces when trying to create positive social change. It's about understanding the soil in which you're planting your seeds, so to speak.
You're right. It's about knowing your audience, understanding their values, and framing your message in a way that resonates with them.
And this brings us back to the challenge of governance.
Hmm.
How do we create structures that both empower individuals and protect the community from harm? How do we find that balance?
Shirky argues that effective governance is crucial for the long-term health and sustainability of any online community.
Yes.
It's about creating a framework of rules, norms, and processes that ensure that the community can function effectively and that its values are upheld.
And as we've seen with examples like eBay and the Amtrak quiet car effective governance, doesn't always require top-down control. It can often emerge organically from the interactions of the members themselves.
The quiet car is such a great example of how a shared understanding of the rules, combined with a willingness to enforce them, can create a self-regulating system. It's not about having a conductor constantly policing people's behavior. It's about creating a shared expectation of what's appropriate in that space.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where people feel empowered to act in ways that benefit the community and where they trust that the rules will be enforced fairly and consistently.
It sounds like governance is about more than just restricting behavior. It's about creating the conditions for positive social interactions. It's about setting boundaries that allow people to feel safe and respected so they can focus on collaborating and creating value.
You've got it. And this brings us to a key point that Shirky emphasizes. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to the challenge of governance. What works for one community might not work for another. It's about finding the right balance between freedom and order, between individual autonomy and collective responsibility.
And this is where the principle of clarity as a violence comes into play, right?
Yeah.
It's a reminder that trying to impose a rigid set of rules on a complex social system can often backfire.
Exactly. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
It might work for a while, but eventually something's got to give him back. Social systems are dynamic and constantly evolving, and your governance structures need to be flexible enough to adapt to those changes.
Shirky uses the example of the U.S. Constitution to illustrate this point.
Oh, right.
As we discussed earlier, the first Constitution adopted in 1776 was too weak to effectively govern the newly formed nation.
Right.
It wasn't until the second Constitution drafted in 1787 that the states were willing to cede enough power to the federal government to create a truly unified nation.
It's a great example of how successful governance structures often emerge from a process of trial and error, of learning from experience, and of adapting to changing circumstances. It's not about getting it perfect on the first try. It's about being willing to learn and adapt as you go.
And this highlights the importance of embracing ambiguity and experimentation when it comes to governing online communities. There's no perfect blueprint, no set of rules that will guarantee success.
Right.
It's about finding what works for your particular community based on its unique needs and values.
And that often means being willing to adapt as the community grows and evolves. What worked in the early stages might not work as the community gets larger and more diverse.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and refining the governance structures to meet the changing needs of the community.
And that brings us to another crucial point. The most successful online communities are those that are able to learn and adapt quickly, those that embrace change and are open to new ideas.
Shirky talks about this in his discussion of user-generated surprises, right?
Yeah.
He argues that the most valuable insights often come not from the designers of the platform, but from the users themselves who find unexpected and innovative ways to use the tools.
It's like the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
When people are faced with a problem, they'll often find creative ways to solve it using whatever tools are available to them.
Cool. And online platforms make it incredibly easy for people to share those solutions, to learn from each other, and to build on each other's ideas.
It's a beautiful example of collective intelligence in action.
And this points to a really important shift in how we think about the roles of designers and users in the creation of online communities. In the past, there was a clear separation between the two. Designers created the platform and users used it. But now the lines are blurred.
Exactly. Users are no longer just passive recipients of information. They're active participants in the design and evolution of the platforms they use. And this creates a much more dynamic and responsive online environment.
It's like a living organism constantly adapting to its environment.
And this brings us back to Shirky's central question. What will we do with all this newfound power? What kind of world will we create with our collective cognitive surplus?
He offers us that thought-provoking choice, doesn't he? Will we build an invisible university of shared knowledge and civic action? Or will we settle for an invisible high school of cat videos and fleeting entertainment? It really makes you think.
It's a powerful metaphor that captures the stakes of this moment. We have the tools, the time, and the talent to create something truly remarkable, to build a world where knowledge is freely shared, where people collaborate to solve pressing problems, and where everyone has the opportunity to contribute their unique skills and talents.
But we also face the risk of squandering this potential, of settling for a world of shallow entertainment and mindless distraction.
It's a choice we all have to make both individually and collectively. And the path we choose will determine the future of our society. So what can we do? What role can we play in shaping this future?
It starts with recognizing the power of our own actions, both online and offline. It's about being mindful of the content we consume, the platforms we support, and the values we promote. It's about being active participants, not just passive consumers.
It's about using our voices to speak out against injustice, to advocate for causes we believe in, and to connect with others who share our values. It's about recognizing that we're all part of a larger ecosystem and that our actions have ripple effects.
And it's about embracing the power of collaboration. None of us can solve these challenges alone. It's going to take all of us working together to create the world we want to see. It's about remembering that we're all in this together.
And on that note, let's take another quick break. When we come back, we'll explore some more specific examples of how people are using their cognitive surplus to make a difference in the world. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before the break, we were talking about that power of collective action and how our individual choices can really shape the future of this whole cognitive surplus phenomenon.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around, isn't it?
It is.
This idea that we're not just passively consuming content, but we're actively shaping the digital landscape.
Right.
It's both empowering and a little daunting at the same time.
It really is. Yeah. But I think the key takeaway here is that it's not about finding some magic formula for success.
Right.
It's about being willing to experiment.
Yeah.
To try new things. Yeah. And to learn from our mistakes as we go.
Shirky talks about this a lot in the book.
Yeah.
He says the best way to figure out what works is to just dive in and see what happens. Don't be afraid to shake things up.
So instead of trying to predict the future, we should focus on creating it.
Exactly. It's about embracing that uncertainty. Being willing to step outside of our comfort zones and try things that might seem a little crazy at first.
Because who knows, maybe that crazy idea will be the next big thing.
You never know. And even if it doesn't work out, you'll still have learned something valuable along the way. Remember Thomas Edison's famous quote?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Failure is just part of the process.
Exactly.
And one of the great things about these online platforms is that they make it so much easier to experiment, to iterate, and to learn from those mistakes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We can launch a new project,
right,
get feedback from users, and make adjustments quickly and easily.
It's a far cry from the old days of traditional media, where it could take months or even years to get a new product or idea to market,
Right.
the digital world moves much faster.
So speed and adaptability are key in this new landscape.
Absolutely. The internet is constantly changing, and what works today might not work tomorrow.
Hmm.
So we have to be nimble, we have to be willing to experiment, and we have to be constantly learning and evolving.
And that's where collaboration becomes so important, right?
Oh, absolutely.
None of us can do this alone. We need to be sharing our ideas, learning from each other's experiences, and supporting each other's efforts.
It's about building a network of like-minded individuals who are all passionate about creating positive change. And thankfully, the tools of social media make it easier than ever to connect with those people, no matter where they are in the world.
We can literally build a global brain,
Right.
a collective intelligence that can tackle the biggest challenges facing humanity.
Think about all the amazing things that are already happening.
Yeah.
We've got open source software, online learning platforms, citizen science projects. People are coming together in all sorts of innovative ways to share their knowledge, skills, and passions. And this is just the beginning.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they do to be a part of this movement?
I think it starts with recognizing that we all have a role to play no matter how big or small. It's about being mindful of our choices, both online and offline.
So it's not just about, building the next Facebook or launching a viral campaign.
Right.
It's also about the smaller everyday actions we take.
Exactly. It's about supporting creators whose work you admire,
Okay.
sharing knowledge and resources with your network,
Mm.
speaking out against injustice, donating to FOM, causes you believe in every little bit counts.
It's like that ripple effect we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
You never know how your actions might inspire others or create a chain reaction that leads to positive change.
And ultimately, that's what this whole conversation about cognitive surplus is about. It's about
Yeah.
recognizing the incredible power we each possess to make a difference in the world.
And then using that power to build something positive, something meaningful, something that benefits not just ourselves, but all of humanity.
Beautifully said. We're living in a truly extraordinary time, a time of unprecedented opportunity. It's up to all of us to decide what we want to do with this newfound power.
So let's not waste it. Let's use our cognitive surplus to build a brighter, more equitable, and more connected future for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you today.
And a huge thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, maybe even a little bit challenging. Remember, the power to shape the future is in your hands. Go out there and make something amazing.
Until next time.